So, hi there, Maddie and Eli. It's a very nice morning here. Still in quarantine, but one of today's crazy stories concerns a tour I did with the mighty company Epoch, English Pocket Opera Company. And they're a great company, and I've worked with them for many years and done many tours with them. And basically, they work with children in schools. Sometimes we would do 3 schools a day. And then at the end of each year, we put on a big show at the Royal Albert Hall and as part of the music services and fill it out with celebrities and parents and relatives. And I think get something like, is it 2,000 children involved who've been picked from all the different schools on the tour. And yeah, fantastic. And of course, after your mum and I split up, I was briefly in a homeless shelter because I obviously had no money for anything and couldn't afford, obviously didn't have a place to stay. And so I must be one of the only people who has ever performed the Royal Albert Hall from a homeless shelter. And when I got back that night, I'm absolutely sure they didn't believe a word I was saying. But it's absolutely true. I was a homeless person who sold out the Royal Albert Hall. Good story, but anyway, not the story I'm actually telling today. This involved a tour of Yorkshire schools. And about a day or so before we left, I got what I thought was an insect bite on my leg. Just a tiny pinprick like red dot. But it was quite itchy. You couldn't poke it. It wasn't pleasant. So in that respect, I thought, that's a little odd. But I was leaving for this tour, which I think was a week or two. No, a week, I think. For all around Yorkshire and Harrogate and Halifax and all these places. And didn't think anything of it. I thought, oh, it's an insect bite. It'll be nothing. And then about the next day, it was definitely bigger and worse. By about day 3, this thing had developed into very unpleasant, how to describe it, like a kind of a mega spot. But it was bleeding and oozing and. So I'm hobbling into schools to work with these kids wearing black trousers with blood pouring down the inside of my leg. And of course we'd come back and I'd go to A&E in each of these cities. But the queue would be so long and we had to start early the next morning. I ended up not being able to get it seen to. So anyway, I took some photos in a hotel room and WhatsApped them to a doctor friend of mine called Alison Baker. She's fabulous. Love you, Alison. And said, what do I do about this? Because it's getting really hard to walk now. It's getting painful. And she basically messaged back and said, for God's sake, man, you have to get that seen to. That infection's going to go to your bloodstream and you might die. So oh, bloody hell. The tour finishes tomorrow. I will make it through to tomorrow. And we'll get through. So anyway, the next morning I had to call the great tenor Paul Featherstone, who was on the tour with us in a different hotel room, and say, can you get down here and bring bandages? And the bed was literally covered in blood. God knows what the hotel owners thought that these opera singers were doing at night. But anyway, so poor Paul had to bring all these dressings and do my leg up and everything. And then, anyway, so we finished the tour and that was good. And I got back and immediately went into hospital. And basically, I remember them drawing a ring on my leg around this big red infection. Then they went out the room because I would have to cut it out, basically. So I remember them going out and coming back in, say, half an hour later. And they looked at my leg and the whole bloody thing had moved. And they said, when an infection can actually be physically seen to be moving, very bad news. So it was moving around my leg. And I think it went up to my groin at one point and then down again. So I ended up with these rings all around. But anyway, so eventually they put me under and cut out a large chunk of my leg. And I call it my epoch scar. And the company still laughs about this. And then I had to have it seen, because there was a big hole in my leg, so I had to have it seen to every few days. I think they had to change the dressing or whatever. But anyway, the postlude to this is if I'm ever dating a girl and the relationship is not particularly serious, we're just having fun, and she asks me, "What's that on your leg?" I always just say, "Oh, someone shot me when I was in America," and people buy it because it really looks like a bullet wound, and it's not. Um, I don't know if you can see it, but it's there. It's that. So that's the story of my epoch scar, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and Daddy loves you always. Bye bye. Mwah.